right. Hey everybody, and welcome to Emerald City Hockey's live Q&A about our projected roster. As I'm sure all of you know, a couple weeks ago we uploaded our latest projected roster for the Seattle Kraken, and it received a ton of love from all of you. So we are eternally grateful for that. Tens of thousands of views, thousands of comments, tons of likes. It's been really fantastic. So we wanted to because it's been so enjoyed by the community, we thought we'd go ahead and do kind of a live Q&A with everybody so you could all ask us questions about it. Because, there were many in the comments. So we thought we'd take this time to address them. How are you doing today, RJ?
Doing great, and excited to talk about the projected roster. I mean, like you said, it was just amazing to see kind of all the interaction, all the engagement with it. We absolutely love to see that. Hundreds of comments and, kind of too many to just get to all in the comment section. So hopefully this will be a chance for us to kind of really dive in and explain the thinking behind some of those roster decisions.
Yeah, so, please, if at any time during this you have a question about it, you can always pull up our projected roster as it stands right now on emeraldcityhockey.com. You could also check out our projected lineup for the Seattle Kraken, where we have all these players in the lineup. So go ahead, you can pull that up. Feel free to start asking us any questions about that as we go here. And
I think we have our first question.
Yeah.
Here we go from Porkins in the chat. Chances Isles lose a vet to Seattle instead of Koivula, Bellows, etc. And that's a really good question. There will be some veteran players probably available to the Kraken from the Islanders, like Nick Leddy or Josh Bailey, that could be available. And they're both really good players. I mean, they're still contributors, to an NHL roster. And I still think the younger route is the one the Kraken are going to take, just mostly for salary cap reasons. I mean, you look at, Leddy or Bailey, you're talking about $5 million kind of commitment, even though it's not for too long a term. And I think the Kraken could maybe turn that cap space into some assets, maybe even a first round pick if they were to kind of rent out that cap space. And I think, especially on the blue line is going to be strong enough that, maybe you don't, Nick Leddy would probably be, maybe around the bottom pair, even as good as he is. Mm-hmm. So I just don't think that's necessary. What do you think, Dylan?
Yeah, I mean, first off, we don't want Cal Clutterbuck. Like, we need that toughness. Has the Tom Wilson incident taught us nothing? We need toughness on this team. No, I agree 100% with you. It doesn't really make much sense in my mind for the Kraken to target someone like Josh Bailey just because of the age and the contract. It's not really what this team's about. As we saw with Vegas, that's not really the place of an expansion team. Like, an expansion team is here to basically weaponize their cap space. If the Islanders want to give us, a first round pick to take Josh Bailey, we'll take Josh Bailey. But otherwise, there's, it makes sense to have as much room available as possible and then go ahead and draft someone young that you can take a flyer on and see if, maybe a little bit of increased ice time or something, helps them transform into a top 6 guy, or on the defensive side, a top 2 pairing guy. That seems like the way Seattle will go, just because it's what Vegas did and it worked really well for them. So,
yep.
This next question is something we knew was going to come up. It's come up a lot in the comments from Crazy Joe. What do you guys think about the odds of getting TJ Oshie? So this is an interesting one. Obviously, TJ Oshie is from the state of Washington, so you'd be a hometown kid coming home. As of right now, it makes sense for the Capitals to protect Oshie. So my only guess is if Seattle was to take him, it would be because he asks the Capitals to leave him unprotected so that Seattle can draft him. That's going to have to be a personal choice from him. I don't know really what the odds of that happening are, especially after like this week with the passing of his father and everything. I don't know if that'll increase his chances of wanting to come home or not. He's someone we would love Seattle to have. I think he's an instant captain candidate if the Kraken decide to have a captain for their inaugural season. We of course saw Vegas didn't. They decided to wait a year. But and even though he's, getting older, as we saw this past week, he still got it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you see that hat trick against the Rangers, and yeah, he absolutely still has it. And I think he would be kind of a slam dunk choice as a first captain and someone, a real face of the franchise. But as you mentioned, I don't know that it makes sense for the Capitals to give him up or to expose him right now. I mean, he's still such a big part of that team and what they do. And especially that game against the Rangers where he had the hat trick, Ovechkin was out, for that game. And Oshie kind of stepped up to provide that scoring. He's, kind of an underrated secondary scorer there on that team. So I don't know that that's what they want to do. The issue is, though, with the Capitals, there's salary cap issues. They're going to have to shed some salary after this season. And of course, ridding themselves of Oshie's contract would be a way to do that. That would solve their problems. But there are other ways around that. They have some, guys in the third and fourth lines making, 2 million or so that they could get rid of, and that would make it work. But there is a path I could see for the Capitals being willing to expose Oshie. And that is kind of through Vitek Vanacek. Now, he's the current pick we have on our projected roster. And I think if the Kraken do take Vanacek from the Capitals, that has the potential to be more harmful to them than them losing Oshie. And the reason for that is they're already tight against the cap. And Vanacek is one of those players where they've been able to save money on the goaltending position. He's paid under $800,000, for this year and next. And that is an absolute bargain of a contract. And so if the Kraken take Vanacek, then now the Capitals, who are already tight against the cap, have to look for another goalie who can be part of that goalie tandem, because Samsonov hasn't proved that he can be the top guy. And that's going to run them $2 to $3 million if they want someone reliable. So now that's even more expensive for them. So I could see the path where the Capitals choose to expose Oshie kind of as bait, just so that the Kraken don't take Vanacek, because that would hurt them so much.
I was going to say, if they expose him, do you think he's an automatic lock for Seattle taking him in that scenario? Or do you think they'll have to sweeten the deal a little bit?
He must be, because I think the Capitals would bet that the Kraken wouldn't want a situation where, because it'll be public that Oshie was exposed. And if they pass on him, that wouldn't look like they'd have to do it, right?
Yeah, no, that wouldn't look good from them. Going back to kind of what we briefly touched on with the Islanders, as far as Oshie's contract situation, he's going to have 4 seasons left at 5.75. He'll be 35 starting next season. So you're talking about a player who's getting older with a decent amount of term left on a fair sized contract. But I like we were talking about earlier, I think the leadership he could provide, the stuff in the community he does, everywhere he's ever been, he's always been very active in the community, and I got to assume that would definitely be the case if he was to come home. And I think he would be someone the Kraken should really want to have as far as trying to grow hockey in the state of Washington and in the city of Seattle. I think all of that stuff would offset kind of his contract situation. But yeah, yep. I could see if they really want to keep Vanacek, I could see them, leaving him exposed, and kind of a mid-round pick maybe goes to Seattle just to ensure they take him. If right. That's even necessary, I don't know. It's entirely possible that, like you said, Ron Francis just knows that this makes the most sense for Seattle. Porkins, again. Over under on how many draft picks Seattle is able to extract via trades leading up to the season. So this is, of course, something we're all very much interested in. As we saw with Vegas last go around, they were able to pick up 2 firsts as well as a handful of seconds and stuff deeper down in the draft. Earlier on in this whole process, something we talked about is I didn't think that Seattle was going to be able to repeat that. I thought it seemed like everybody had kind of structured. They knew this was coming for the last couple years, what it was going to look like. And so they were kind of structuring their rosters so that they weren't going to have to be in, such tight situations the way they were with Vegas. But now I look around the league and I see potentially like 4 spots where they might be able to, if Ron Francis really holds their feet to the fire, he might be able to get like 4 first-round picks out of all this.
Right. I could see that. I mean, going down the list, I think we were looking the other day and, you see teams like a Montreal or a Nashville or, there are some spots there where he can get some high picks.
Yeah.
Yeah, over under. I'd say maybe, let's say 2.5, three and a half first rounders. Where are we putting that over under?
Yeah, I would conservatively put it at 2.5. I think if they ended up with 4 total, including their own first round pick, that probably is the most realistic. I could see. So 2.5 is probably a good place to put it. But I mean, yeah, I see 3 right off the bat. Like you said, Montreal and Nashville, and then Tampa Bay, right? Like at some point, we're going to have to address this Tampa Bay situation. And no matter what, no matter who Seattle takes from Tampa Bay, they're getting a pick back for it, because there's no way that they're just going to take a cheap contract from Tampa and move on, and Tampa's just going to let that be the only thing that happens, right? They're going to have to move like a Tyler Johnson or an Alex Killorn or someone like that, and Seattle is the easiest way to move that contract out, and they're going to have to pay the price to do that. So as far as I'm concerned, those 3 teams, if Montreal really wants to keep Jake Allen, that's 3 first rounders right there.
All right, next question. Crazy Joe, odds of the goalie's mask being covered in tentacles. It's got to be at least
95.
One of the 2
Yeah, 95%. It definitely has to be. I do think that's a great thing that you brought up, Crazy Joe, because I think that's something that has not been really talked about. We haven't, we've seen the jerseys and the uniforms and everything, but as far as goalie masks, the whole nautical theme, there's just so many possibilities there. And, I haven't really seen too many mock-ups from anybody. Have you?
Not a whole. I've seen a few. Instagram is usually the place to go, but there's some, but a lot of them have tentacles on it. I mean, it's something you got to do.
It's too natural, but yes, tentacles. So, big ships on there. Right. You're going to have all that good stuff.
Yeah. All right. Question from Ben. Quick question. What team do you reckon will quickly build a rivalry with Seattle?
I guess the easy answer would be Vancouver.
Vancouver. It's got to be.
The geography just makes it too likely, right?
Right. And I think it's also a case where you have a chance that Seattle could one-up them very quickly. For a Vancouver team that's gone a long time and still hasn't won a cup, I think you saw that with San Jose and Vegas, where here's this new team that might make it look easy, and that can kind of add some more hatred to the rivalry.
Yeah, but as we saw with San Jose and Vegas, doesn't hurt to have a playoff series with a lot in it to build a lot of ill will towards each other. And ultimately, that's just what it's going to take, is we're going to have to play out a season. We're going to have playoff series and stuff before some of those intense rivalries really start. You always need history there. But yeah, Vancouver, in my opinion, is the kind of the easy one, just because it's fairly natural for rivalries to occur when teams are that close to each other. When they're already fighting for fans.
For sure.
What else we got here?
All right, we have Sergeant Nichols 13.
Mm-hmm.
How active do you see them being in free agency? I think it will be the only option for top 6 forwards, particularly centers.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about that a little bit when we did our lineup video. As of right now, from Nashville, we have them taking Ryan Johansson. And, I'd argue he's still a top 6 guy. He's probably not a first-line center the way he's been playing the last couple seasons. But yeah, we talked about the biggest problem is that kind of second line, right?
Beyond that, especially at center.
Yeah, it's huge.
I think Ryan Nugent-Hopkins for sure needs to be a target, if they can get him at a reasonable number. And I mean, maybe you get Tyler Johnson in some kind of side deal with Tampa, but there are holes at center, and I think they are going to have to kind of attack free agency if they want to be really competitive year one.
Do you think Nuge is leaving Edmonton? Because I flip-flop on this a lot.
I do too. Just the other day I was thinking, he probably stays, but that could change. I think he's probably going to go more elsewhere.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to wait and kind of see how their playoff run goes this year. But I could see him maybe taking a pay cut to stay there and kind of be that middle 6 center. At times he's up on the second line. At times he's playing down on the third line. Because yes, I agree. He would be like the no-brainer. Like, let's spend almost whatever it takes to bring him in because he's still young, and he's proven that he's really good in that middle six center situation. Like he's been phenomenal up there. I think he kind of gets forgotten behind McDavid and Draisaitl and all the points that they score and all that stuff, but he really helps make their bottom six at times work when they really do not have a lot of talent down there.
Yep. All right. Crazy Joe. People want a way to stream these games legally without paying for cable or the NHL package. Do you guys think Root Sports will release a pay for streaming service? That's a good question.
Yeah, I'm gonna say no because I'm pretty sure the streaming rights are gonna now be exclusively held by ESPN for the NHL, and I don't think that they're regional in any way. So, without like going through that whole contract and everything, I know that the plan was that NHL.TV, which is the current streaming package for the NHL, was going to be absorbed into ESPN Plus, and they would hold the exclusive streaming rights to all NHL games for the length of that. I believe it was a 10-year or 7-year deal, I think. So my guess is no, we're not going to have a local streaming option. So you're going to be stuck in that kind of, you're going to have to pay for the cable package that gets it. I think this is probably the last decade we're going to have to be dealing with all of that kind of stuff. I feel
Hopefully.
like right now sports has kind of been the last, bastion of cable television as far as keeping it alive still. I just think there's too many contracts all wrapped up in it right now for things to change quickly. But yeah, my best guess is it's just going to be rolled into ESPN, and then you're going to have to deal with the blackouts issue. And, you'll be able to watch every game but your home team, even though you pay X amount for that service. It's such a great situation. Yep. Maybe we'll try to get a VPN sponsor when the season gets closer so everyone can get around that. But you didn't hear that from me.
All right. Who we got next, Dylan?
We've got Porkins again. Who would be the most surprising yet somewhat plausible, unexpected selection? Who would bust the model the most?
Ooh.
I'm trying to think. I mean, we have some pretty like deep cut analytics guys, particularly on that fourth line.
Right.
Based on some comments and stuff we've been getting back, our selection from Ottawa has seems like it might be a stretch, taking Chris Tierney.
Ooh, you know what? I think maybe them taking a big swing on one of these big contracts, maybe a Brent Burns. That's one that I've seen that for some reason it seems like, a lot of the media still are projecting that. I know in the Athletics most recent mock draft, they had Burns going to Seattle. I think the Sharks would have to pay a significant amount for that to happen. But he's one that I think could kind of break the model just given the length of that contract. It's still going out until he's 40 for another $8 million a year. And I think that's something that we are not envisioning right now is them taking money and term. But if they were to take a swing on one of those guys, maybe JVR, Van Riemsdyk from Philadelphia, or Voracek or someone like that, those would be the guys that I think quickest would kind of break the model for me.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head right there. And yeah, we still see tons of people saying Burns, and I get it. Burns is still very effective. He's a very valuable piece. You can move him up to forward if you want to, right? Like, there's tons of stuff you could do, right? That might be an issue. That might be a semi-viable strategy for the Kraken, right? They're going to have this fairly deep blue line, but as we're talking, they're kind of limited in top six forwards. It's entirely possible that they select Burns specifically to move him to forward. But yeah, I'm kind of with you. It seems that contract is such a hard pill to swallow. You're talking 4 more years at 8 per. That's just such a long time for so much money. And like we said earlier, they're going to have to try to weaponize the cap space while they can. As we're seeing, Vegas did that early on, and it was very beneficial for them. But it's kind of time to pay the piper now, and they're going to be in some interesting cap situations the next couple seasons, Vegas. So I would like to see Seattle kind of keep that in mind as much as possible.
Agreed. Next, Julian Otto. Do you think they will sign some European players in free agency?
It's always a possibility. Um, I don't know because of COVID, everything was so difficult this year as far as trying to scout players from overseas. Um, that being said, there's always some top options. You've paid a little more attention to that, RJ.
You're right. Of the teams to do it, I do think the Kraken be one of the more likely. One, because they weren't really able to participate in like NCAA free agency, that could play a factor. But I also know that they've really invested in their European scouting staff. You've got Pele Eklund, you've got Alexander Plyushev. I know that they're out scouting these guys, or maybe not out scouting these guys, but they're watching, and I think they have their targets. So mostly because the Kraken couldn't get involved in NCAA free agency, and they're going to have to be building things from scratch. I do think they'd be one of the more likely teams to engage in European free agency.
Yeah, and Ron Francis has a history of taking players from overseas. He hasn't been like a North America centric GM like some of the other guys in the league. So we know he does pay attention to what's going on over there, and he invests in scouting over there. So yeah, I think the odds of that are fairly good. We have Alaska Joe. Why does Calgary not like Oliver Shylington more? I think he's good and would be a great pick by the Kraken. The easy answer for me, and this might be a little bit of a cop-out, is just because he was drafted by a different group and brought in and coached by two previous coaches, so there's just no like loyalty. Like he wasn't the guy for anybody that's left in the organization, and as we've seen, kind of guys that are borderline as far as he's as you said, he's been good as a depth defenseman, but he's never really broken out to be something better. And so guys that are kind of in that no man's land of, well, as his contract expires at the end of this year, are we going to re-sign him to a big deal? We've just seen in the past, teams don't like to hang around to those guys if they're not the group that drafted them, the management that brought him in, or the coaching staff that developed him, right?
Right. And I remember we were at the 2015 draft. We went to that draft together, and that's when Shillington was taken. And even then, he was a polarizing player. He was one of those guys who weren't sure where they were going to be taken. So either you love him or you hate him, it seems like, from an evaluation standpoint.
Right. So it's just one of those where the current regime in Calgary just might not be super happy with him, or like I said, they just don't have loyalty to him. They have loyalty towards other young guys, and he's just kind of in the way, right? He's not good enough to ensure getting a nice big extension as he finishes up his entry-level deal. So it's unfortunate, but it's just something that happens. Burke drafted him, maybe he'll bring him into Pittsburgh. They need depth defensemen. That's something I could see happening.
All right, Sergeant Pickles, do you see the Kraken trying to come out of the expansion draft at the cap minimum, or do they end up with multiple Johansson, Subban, Burns type contracts? And I think we kind of touched on this a little bit, with what would break our model. I do think they kind of target the minimum. Maybe they go for one, maybe two of those big contracts, but if they do, I don't think they're ones with term on them. Subban, because he only has 1 year, could be fine. Like Pavelski, who I have, he's 1 year, so that could be fine. But anything with term, I don't know.
Yeah, and that would be the Burns and Johansson contracts because they both have 3 to 4 years left at 8 per. Yeah, I mean, it all comes down to, are those teams willing to give up first-round picks for them? Or even first-round plus, right? If they've already made a deal for one of them, and then let's say they've already made a deal for Johansson, and they're getting a first back from Nashville to take him, and then Doug Wilson calls up Ron Francis, and he's like, hey, what's it going to take Brent Burns? Ron Francis can up the asking price beyond a first because he's already got one of those contracts on the books. Could be right. I don't know that any team, I'm not sure any contract being moved off the books is worth 2 first-round picks, but it's entirely possible that maybe they get a first this year and a second next year to take on an additional big money contract, in which case I think that's kind of what they need to do. We've talked about it even today. They're going to have issues at the top 6 with forwards, and you can try to piecemeal that together with some of these large contract guys that are kind of being cast off by the situations they're in currently, but ultimately you just need to draft and develop those guys. It's just really the only way to get them. It's so rare for them to hit free agency, certainly in their primes. So if you're looking at trying to build a team that's going to be a legitimate Stanley Cup contender 3-4 years from now, you're going to have to really stockpile on picks this year and next year and try to get as many as possible and try to just develop those guys, because it's just so hard to find them in free agency or via trade.
Yep. All right. What do we have next?
Let's see. We have Dante. Do you think Oilers will trade up in NHL draft to get someone they want, and who? I think everything for this Oilers offseason is a wait and see as far as what they do in the playoffs, because,
Oh, absolutely.
They could win the Stanley Cup, and then in which case, no, they're probably not going to move up in the draft for anything. If anything, they'll probably trade their pick to shore something up even more. Certainly if they go on any sort of deep run, but just miss the Stanley Cup, they're going to do that. Otherwise, I feel like even if they were to lose in the first round again, they're in win now mode with Connor McDavid and Draisaitl and all those guys. I think it would be highly unlikely for them to move up in the draft from wherever they end up being.
All right, we have Alaska Joe. Any pending UFAs you see the Kraken targeting in free agency? I have my hopes up for Dougie Hamilton, but it's probably unrealistic. Dougie Hamilton would be awesome. That would be amazing. Like another guy in Carolina, Rod Brindamore, I think he's staying. Those guys seem to like it in Carolina, and I don't blame them. It's a good situation. But, if the Kraken could pry him away, I think that's absolutely something they should do. As far as other UFAs, we talked about Ryan Nugent-Hopkins earlier. There's Chris Drieger, who we do know that the Kraken are interested in. James Myrtle reported that. So those would be kind of the three targets I would look at.
If you're not going to say Ovechkin?
There we go. Offer Ovechkin the max deal and see what he says.
I mean, talk about like jump starting hockey in Seattle. You just pay whatever it takes to bring in Ovechkin. Otherwise, a lot of the pending free agents are guys that we know are going to re-sign. Ovechkin's going to stay in Washington. Landeskog's going to stay in Colorado. Taylor Hall's going to be an interesting thing, but I don't really think he fits Seattle's plan. As we were just talking, they're kind of looking at a more of a 3 to 4 year window rather than trying to compete immediately right out of the gate. So I don't think it would make a lot of sense for them to pay up for a 30-year-old Taylor Hall. Same goes for like a Tyson Barrie or even a Zach Hyman. I love Philip Deneau. If he leaves Montreal, I would like to see him come in, because I think he's someone that could be an interesting second line center for them. He's not flashy at all. He's not going to score any points or goals for you, but like we've talked about him before, he's just a monster when it comes to the analytics and what he does on the ice as far as keeping the puck out of his zone and into the opposing zone.
Absolutely.
All right.
Crazy Joe, is 5 months enough time to button up Climate Pledge Arena? I don't want to open the season on the road. That's a good question.
That's a really good question.
I think they will get it done on time. And I maybe you saw the team and all their social media stuff. They posted pictures from the ice slab pour at the arena yesterday. And so when I saw that, actually, I headed over to the arena. It's right over here by my apartment. So I walked over there to kind of check it out, see what the progress is. I try and do that every few days. And I was able to talk with someone who was working there, and they were saying that, it's coming along well, but they are working pretty much nonstop all through the night. They did that slab pour at like midnight, and it just straight on through, because it just, they're on such a tight schedule. But they just seem pretty confident about the timeline. And I think it'll get done, even though they're cutting it pretty close.
Yeah, any of these large construction projects, we see it with stadiums all the time. It seemingly takes like 2 years to get the framing up, but then once like the framing's up and the concrete on the outside's poured, it all comes together really fast on the inside. So I think it'll happen. They've been pretty honest through the whole process about everything. I would think if there was some sort of issue or potential delay, that even if it's not a for sure, but a possibility, I would think they'd be talking about it openly. We still have a 50-50 shot of starting the season on the road just because, right? Only half the league can open night, have opening night at home.
road.
Yeah, so it might be one of those things, but it might not necessarily be because the stadium isn't quite finished.
Right.
Porkins, among the current projected selections, who do you think is most likely to underperform, and who do you think is most likely to overperform expectations?
Ooh.
I'm going to start with overperform with our boy Mason Appleton, who I think if anybody's going to kind of be that, William Carlson, like out of nowhere guy that he was with Vegas, if anyone's going to be that for Seattle, it's going to be Mason Appleton. He's currently with the Winnipeg Jets. He's kind of stuck on like their third line, but he's putting up good numbers. He's got good analytic numbers. We've watched him, and while he has some issues in his game, this definitely, he just has fantastic instincts and he has a nose for the net. And I just think he could be someone that, with some increased ice time, not being buried on that deep Winnipeg team, he could really blossom into somebody that I don't think anybody would really expect him to.
Right. And I guess for me, overperforming, I mean, I'm tempted to go with Austin Wagner, but given if it's my expectations, I don't know how he possibly overperforms those. So so maybe not. Um Appleton is a good pick. I think that's the guy I was going to go with. Maybe a more sleeper guy would be Evgeny Svechnikov.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you give him some more opportunity, he could really bust out. He's got the requisite skill. He's got good size. I just think he's been playing on this Red Wings team where hasn't been getting big minutes, and they're not the most skilled team. If you put him in a good situation, I think he could overperform.
Yeah, I think he could definitely overperform. As far as guys that underperform, um, one guy I talked about in our lineup video is, right now we project Ryan Graves from Colorado to be on the top pairing, and I could see him maybe struggling leaving that deep blue line in Colorado.
Mm.
Particularly if he isn't matched with someone like a Matt Dumba, I could see him maybe struggling a little bit. Not enough to like be scratched or anything. I don't think he's going to be a massive disappointment, but if the kind of the idea around the league is that he's totally capable of potentially being a top pairing guy, and I think I've seen enough kind of questions from him that make me think maybe not so much. Otherwise, Joe Pavelski, just because of his age, at any time guys like that can just
Right.
fall off a cliff, and I
I
think
was going to mention Pavelski and Giordano. They're great players and they've done well, but they're going to be 37, and time is undefeated. It'll catch up to them eventually. So there's always the potential for that.
yeah. Dante, do you think the Kraken will receive any first round picks and deals to keep players on teams during the expansion draft? And if so, who's most likely to give that up? We touched on that earlier. We both kind of think we set the over under at 2.5 first rounders probably for the Kraken to get them. Most likely candidates would be Montreal if they want to keep Jake Allen, Nashville, and Tampa Bay because they just need to move a contract out of there that's going to be not wanted by really anybody else. David E. Is Joe Thornton headed to the Kraken to reunite with Pavelski for a cup win? What do you think, RJ? Is Jumbo Joe going to head out west?
I don't see it happening. That'd be something though. Getting back together Pavelski and going for it on an expansion team. I think we have to see how the Leaf season ends this year. I think it would be great to see Jumbo win a cup there, and at that point, who knows? Maybe he just goes back to San Jose to kind of play out his career at that point, or who knows what he does. But I don't see Joe Thornton coming to Seattle. I don't know what you think, Dylan, but
No, I agree. I think yeah, we got to see if Toronto wins the cup, he retires, right? Like I doubt he'll come back, or
yeah,
if he does, he would just come back with Toronto to try to win a second one. So
right.
I don't see him coming out here. Sergeant Pickles, with the AHL team being less than optimum until Palm Springs is ready, do you see them starting with a younger lineup than they would otherwise? I don't think so. I think realistically, this is where Vegas kind of screwed Seattle a little bit. Is they went to the Cup final their inaugural season, so expectations are very high for Seattle now, probably unrealistically high in some people's minds. So I think if they're drafting guys that are legit NHL starters and stars, they're gonna make sure that they're in the lineup. And as I said earlier, I think they're their plan is really more of a 3 to 4 year plan. So it makes more sense to probably, let them develop in the CHL if they're from there, Europe if they're drafted them from there. Um, just because I think that'll be more beneficial for them long term.
Right. And if anything, I would think it might go the other way where they're going to be splitting, they're going to be splitting an AHL affiliation with another team to start with until Palm Springs is ready. And that, of course, is going to make call-ups more difficult. There's going to be more logistical challenges. So I think you might have maybe more veteran guys that stick where younger guys don't get called up as much because of the logistical difficulties, and maybe you want to just kind of let them be and not mess with their momentum.
Yeah, we saw that this year with like a team like the Chicago Wolves being split amongst 2 NHL teams, and that did create some issues as far as moving guys around.
Right. All right. Next, we have Lisa. How much do you think the roster will be formed and altered based on team chemistry?
It's a good question, because I got to think it's not easy just to pull all these guys who've never really played together and throw them all onto one team and just be like, let's go get them, right? It's going to take, camp is going to be very, very important. I don't know if the NHL has really talked about what the plan is for camps this year. Obviously, they didn't really have much of one last year because of COVID. Have they?
Right. No, not really. I mean, it was a very short, few days thing, but I think they're aiming for it to go back to normal. I think that September 22nd was the target date, I think, for preseason. And so I imagine they'll be able to have a camp before that. But I do think there's going to be a lot of line shuffling early on. You're going to see that line blender from whoever the Kraken's coach is, just trying to kind of put things together and see what sticks. And I think that's the best course of action. You want to test out everything because you just don't know how these guys are going to play together.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. Lines are never set in stone, right? Look at any NHL team around the league right now. They're probably not running with the same lines they started the season with, especially because you have things like injuries that always shuffle things around. But it's just one of those things that happens. Line gets cold, you got to shake it up a little bit, move someone around.
All right, Greg, what do you think the AHL team would be called? Palm Springs Big Squids.
Why not?
I like that one. Do you have a name favorite for the Palm Springs team, Dylan? What do you think?
No, because it's always hard. It's very rarely it seems like the AHL team really matches up well, like name wise, with its.
I don't think it'll be Kraken related.
Yeah.
I think they're going to go something unique because they're kind of new to that market and they want something that I think that market can associate with. And I don't know how much Kraken is great for Seattle, but I don't know how much it speaks to Palm Springs. A
desert
things fairly often. I think maybe Firebirds is one that they were considering, something desert related. I think it has to match the market.
Yeah. The Palm Springs Oasis. Let's go. You have a built-in soundtrack for every game. It'd be great.
Yep. All right. Crazy Joe.
Yeah.
Another mascot prediction video from you guys. That was hilarious.
That is probably my favorite video that we've done. Certainly it's the one that I've rewatched the most.
And again, that was a live reaction. We had never seen those before. And of course, seeing your MS Paint designs, that was really fun to do. I wouldn't mind making another one. I really thought they would have announced a mascot by now. So we might actually have some more time. We should come up with more. I'm still a fan of Seagull. I think the Seagull idea is what they ought to go with.
It's definitely going to be Poseidon for sure.
The comment section liked Poseidon the most. I think we got the most positive comments on Poseidon.
Let's go.
Win in that respect.
Yeah. Sergeant Pickles, which selection do you see being traded right away for picks, especially D-men? Yeah, that is the most natural place for Seattle to quickly move someone. I think if there's working off what we have projected right now, which we know is obviously subject to change based on what teams decide to do, I could see someone, certainly if they were to bring in a Matt Dumba, he would be very much in demand, I would think, around the league from contenders. I could see Jeremy Lauzon being someone that teams want, Ryan Graves being someone teams want.
Travis would be another one. That would be the one I'd add.
Yeah. And even some of the young guys, if a team thinks, highly of a Jake Bean or a Vince Dunn, Why not see if you can grab them for like a second round pick, right? They're a more proven prospect than anything you're going to find in the second round probably, and they're a little further along. So if you think, your coaching staff has kind of that missing link for them, why not try to take a flyer on them? I don't know that Seattle would trade them away for that, but it would be something I would consider doing if I was a GM.
Agreed. All right.
Lauren Darkin, what should be the opening theme for the Seattle Kraken when they hit the ice?
Oh, we need to do a video on this, on game day experience. We need to do a video on that sort of thing for sure, because I don't thought enough about this.
Yeah,
but it's a good question.
It is a good question. Obviously, it being Seattle, there's just a massive amount of fantastic music for them to choose that's all from Seattle. You have obviously all the grunge stuff we know. You have more recent stuff. Kenny G, my boy.
You're not going to let that go,
I'm not going to let it go. And I'm telling you, there are totally situations during an NHL game where that would be perfect. I'm struggling to think of them right now. You know what? I think when the other team's changing a goalie, when they got to pull their goalie for some reason, tell me it wouldn't be great to have Kenny G pop on. That would be pretty good.
Okay, that would be perfect. All right.
But yes, definitely we're going to do a video on that at some point. It's something we've been kicking around for a while now. But we wanted to kind of wait until the season got a little bit closer.
Yep. All right, we got David E. What will the total cap number be for the Kraken year one? That's a good question. I think a lot of it depends on how much they're wanting to weaponize their cap space in year one. I mean, they could spend right up to the cap with just kind of 1 year commitments like a Louis Eriksson or a Joe Pavelski or Giordano, or guys that help them. Yeah, throwing out the bait to the Canucks fans with Louis Eriksson. They could really spend up to the cap. I know they have ownership that's willing to do that, and they could get a lot of assets if they're willing to do that, and things that'll just expire after the first year. So I think it could be anywhere from 63, 64, 65 million to right up to the cap. It just depends how much you want to spend, because they have all that flexibility.
Yeah, and I'll give you the shout out on our projected roster page on our website, emeraldcityhockey.com. You've done the math for the projected roster we have out right now, and there's currently, if they were to draft exactly as we have predicted, they would have a $69 million cap hit, which would mean they'd have around $12.5 million in cap space. So that's right in that window you were talking about. Ethan Morrow is Oscar Klefbom.
That's a nice place to be.
Yeah, exactly. Is Oscar Klefbom on the Kraken radar? I love him as a player, can quarterback a power play, shut down top competition, and is a rocket of a shot. His shoulder is a huge question mark, though, and that is the big question mark, right? Is where is he at?
Yep.
Dealing with his injury. It's always hard to project when it comes to that. I've started to come around in sports to that, there's virtually no injury that's too scary, right? Go back a decade and in the NFL, and torn ACL was like a death sentence, and now it's got guys tearing them in training camp and coming back for the playoffs. So I don't want to say he should be completely off their radar until he signs a 1 year prove it deal somewhere else, right? But I want to see him playing. I want to see his shot. I want to see if he still has it all, because shoulders are probably the one place that's still the trickiest, right? We've seen guys come back from knee surgeries and maybe they're a little bit slower, but it doesn't impact them too much. We've seen shoulder injuries in all sports really linger for a long time and greatly impact players. So they're still kind of the injury that freaks me out the most. It gives me the most pause.
And watching that press conference he did, I mean, it just looks such a sad situation there, because they were asking, do you think you're going to play? And he's, I don't know. I can't tell you. I'm not sure. And you can tell that he has that uncertainty, and he just, he looked kind of nervous and sad when he was saying that. I mean, that doesn't instill me with a lot of confidence that, he's going to be able to come back right away and be someone who could be on the Kraken's radar. As much as I absolutely love his game,
Mm-hmm.
we got to wait and see both the Kraken and the Oilers.
Yeah, no, it's disappointing because you feel like now that Edmonton's finally turning that corner, he really deserves to be there with them, and he can't. But yeah, like I said, he's gonna have to come back and sign like a 1-year prove it deal with somebody, and I don't know that it makes sense for Seattle to be that team.
Puck Place Market, Palm Springs Scorpions. I like that name.
Yeah, that would be good.
That's a good one. That'd fit in well with the desert.
Yeah. Porkins again. Which player is most likely to be the first traded during the season? I mean, we kind of talked about the guys that we could see Seattle flipping quickly. I think all those guys, Ryan Graves, Matt Dumba, Jeremy Lauzon, all those guys are kind of the same guys. If they're not moved during the offseason, they would be the trade deadline targets from other teams, I think.
Yep, agreed. All right. Baji Kimran, I'm a Columbus fan. I'm guessing your choices will be Kukin, Kivlenix, Stenlund, and one of these two, Robinson or Nyquist. They'll protect one. Yeah, I think, Baji, you've got a good read on, what the protection situation will be. Kukin should be available. Kivlenix will be available. Stenlund, I think, will be available. And I think you hit on it. Yeah, one of Robinson or Nyquist, will be protected. So right now, I think that's pretty much what we're projecting. We have Stenlund, and we have them protecting Robinson. So I might take Robinson over Stenlund, but I think Nyquist, he's been out all year with an injury. With that contract, I just don't think the Kraken should be involved with that contract. I think they should shy away. So I think Stenlund would be the option, and maybe Robinson if he was available. What do you think, Dylan?
Yeah, I agree. Seattle's already going to have enough choices along the blue line that it doesn't really make sense to be looking there. Yeah, we've talked about Stenlund. We have him as the pick because, as you said, it makes the most sense, but it's also not one that we're like 100%. He's definitely not one of the locks that we have going on.
And I think Kivlenix is worth a mention really quickly. The Blue Jackets have a great goaltending system. They bring up goalies consistently that are very good. And I do like what I've seen from Kivlenix. He had his first start of the season yesterday. And they did lose 3 to the Red Wings. He gave up 3 goals, but it was on 34 shots. But I liked overall what I saw from him. The goals, weren't too much on him. I'd be interested to see him more, in their last game or two of the season.
Yeah, I just don't think Seattle's they can only take so few goalies. I don't know that they're going to take someone that's still so unproven at the NHL level if they don't need to.
Right.
So that would be the thing that gives me pause there. But if Montreal's protecting Jake Allen through a pick and Vanacek's not available from Washington, they're gonna need goalies from somewhere. Daniel, during the expansion draft, are you guys considering doing a live stream event at one of the locations of the draft in July? Absolutely. So
yeah,
we're still waiting to see where and kind of what the exact situation is up there. I know there's an article last night about it. RJ,
right? Yeah, we got some more details yesterday from I think it was Jeff Baker, the Seattle Times, talking about how there's going to be multiple sites, multiple locations, and there's going to be kind of a primary one and other secondary ones. We definitely are going to have a presence at least one of the locations. We're waiting to see, one, where the primary location is. We kind of need to know that. And we're going to see how the plans more play out. But as we know that, we'll make our own plans and get that out to all of you. We will definitely have a presence at the expansion draft event.
Yeah. Sergeant Pickles, personal picks for goal song from us. Do you have one, RJ? It's a tough one. I will say this: one of the songs that, as far as like personal experience goes, that I thought worked really well as a goal song, was from the Sharks a while ago when they had "Holiday" from Green Day. I thought that was a really, really good goal song. I know you didn't enjoy it, but I thought it worked really well.
Okay.
It's not, Seattle centric. I'd have to think about that, but
Right. Um, I don't know. We definitely have to think about that more. I'm sorry we don't have a good answer right now. This is driving home that we need like a game day experience video where we talk about
yeah,
all these things: intro song, goal song, all of that. So that's definitely a video that we have to do going forward.
yeah. I guess to throw something out there that is Seattle centric, I've always been a Soundgarden guy. Spoon Man comes to mind as a good option from them as far as something that's upbeat and it's got a good driving rhythm. That's generally what you're looking for after a goal, because let's be honest, you hardly hear that song anyway because everyone's cheering so loud.
Yep.
All
All
right.
right, Lauren Dark. I think if the Kraken, when they hit the ice, their theme song has to be Jimi Hendrix "Voodoo Child."
That would be actually perfect. That's a really, really good suggestion. And it presents a ton of options as far as the rest of the experience, right? You can do all sorts of stuff. Something you and I have talked about forever that not enough teams do is they do not use the ice as like a projection screen nearly enough. We've both seen
Mm-hmm.
it on TV and in person, how amazing it can look. And teams just, for whatever reason, I can't imagine it's a pricing issue. Like all the equipment's already there. I can't imagine it uses that much extra energy to be projecting an image onto the ice. But like no teams do it anymore, and I think that's
It's
really
written
disappointing.
junior teams tend to do it more, and it's not a pricing issue if they're the ones doing it. But I do think the
Exactly.
Kraken take advantage of that.
Yeah, and I think all the stuff with the Kraken especially, like it's it's too obvious, right? They've said they never want to show the Kraken, but maybe they'll do something similar to maybe our intro, right? Where they can show the water and you can have something playing and maybe you see some eyes down there, something a little menacing to get everybody ready to go. Just saying.
Yep.
It's out there. Feel free to steal it from us, Kraken, if you're listening. I'd be okay with that.
Yep. Crazy Joe, Man in the Box, Alice in Chains for the penalty song.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, it's too perfect. That
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Uh,
Awesome job. Uh, and got Christian down there, Lithium by Nirvana. Yeah, I mean that's one of those staple songs from that Seattle grunge period. They're just gonna have so many to choose from. I think it makes sense to kind of pick it, bring in one from each of those bands, right? You're gonna have to have a Nirvana, an Alice in Chains, a Soundgarden, and a Pearl Jam song. You just kind of need all that stuff. But then, as we were just talking about, you got Jimi Hendrix going back in the day. I'm sure they'll bring in, something like Macklemore or something more recent too. It'll be interesting. I just hope that they don't go with the like standard, we need like 3 Imagine Dragons songs just all the time.
right.
Because it's too many teams are being lazy and doing that, and it bothers me.
Yep. All right, Sergeant Pickles. Who would be the big splash selection that they intentionally announce first, i.e., Fleury for Vegas?
Well,
It's got to be Oshie if he's there, right?
yeah, I was gonna say if Oshie's made available to them, if he asks to be left unprotected by Washington, TJ Oshie is absolutely that guy. The
Yep.
hometown guy, as we talked about earlier in this, it makes too much sense, and it would be amazing to have him there in person to be the first player to put that sweater on. I think that would be a really, really big deal.
Yep. Otherwise, maybe Tyler Johnson if he's the Washington guy that they go with, or if it's our roster is projected, I would say either Joe Pavelski because we're having him as the first captain, or Matt Dumba. I think
Yeah,
from that roster.
yeah. Or realistically, if RJ had his wish, it would be Austin Wagner. So
Yes, absolutely. Introducing as future Kraken 20 goal scorer Austin Wagner. Set the expectation right there.
yep, there we go. When it doesn't happen, everybody, you know who to yell at. That guy right there.
All right. All right, we got Joe. Now that the Kraken has paid in full and can sign players, who do you think will be the Kraken's Reed Duke? Good question.
Yeah, I. It's something we've talked about. We've kind of kicked some stuff back and forth, but there's no kind of like with Reed Duke. It's going to be someone who just kind of comes out of nowhere, most likely.
Right. Well, I do think there's there's some options locally. I think they might want to go with someone with Washington ties. We heard on 31 Thoughts that the Silvertips Cole Fonstad would be a potential first free agent signing, and it would make sense. He was, I think, a 4th-round pick with Montreal. He's had a good season, so it would make sense from a prospect perspective and from kind of having hometown ties playing in Everett.
Yeah, but you're really talking about guys that didn't sign with their NHL team after they were drafted. They waited a couple years, their rights expired. So it's you're not talking about guys that are going to come in and be in this lineup probably opening night. So
Yep.
Going down to Sergeant Pickles, your choice, opponent, and location for the first Kraken outdoor stadium game.
Ooh, that's a fun one.
Yeah, we've talked about making this a video too in the past. As far as opponents go, going back to like our rivalry talk from earlier, I guess Vancouver, just because they're local. You could do a whole Pacific Northwest thing. If they develop a rivalry with someone else, I'd say them. I think all of the Stadium Series and outdoor games that have been the best have been the ones that have been good rivalries, right? Those games are more interesting to begin with, and so then when you put them in a new environment, one that's still, I don't want to say it's a total hostile environment because generally you get a lot of away fans at those games, but it's still very much they do a good job of making them feel like you're still in that host city and it has the flavor of that host city. So you have a quick thought as to where it might be held or where you'd like to see it?
My top choice would be Lumen Field, and I know it's not, the football stadium isn't really an original concept, but I do think that Seattle has something unique there with how loud the crowd can get, and it's even among NFL teams, it's unique. It's a home advantage unlike any other. How loud that crowd can get at Lumen Field. And it's spurred the Seahawks to victory so many times. And I think it'd be really cool to see the atmosphere if that place could get packed for a hockey game. So that would be my choice.
Yeah, I've always loved what is now T-Mobile Park where the Mariners play. I just love the aesthetic of it. I don't know how well it would handle a hockey game. You and I have been to outdoor games at both football arenas and baseball arenas, and the football ones just work better. Because sightline wise and stuff, generally for the outdoor games that are at ballparks, if you're sitting like in the outfield, you're just a million miles away. It just doesn't end up working. And generally, you also then have like the big jumbotron behind you or somewhere out there with you when you're in the outfield. So it makes for a not as great viewing experience. I've always loved the design and the aesthetic of Husky Stadium. And the fact that it's kind of right there by the water, I've just always thought that was cool. So I'll give that a shout out. But I'm with you. It's got to be Lumen.
Yep.
Lauren Darkin, if you want to know what kind of players the Kraken will select, just look back on the past pickups Francis had for the Canes. Big body, strong guys with top end skill like Aho and Nikas. Yeah, I mean he has a type. We also know he's going to target analytics-friendly guys, right? That's something that's been talked about. That's clearly how that front office was structured, was to bring in a lot of guys that have history in analytics. So that's especially when you look at like our projected roster, that fourth line is all guys that are just analytics beasts. They might not necessarily fit the physical mold that Francis wants, but I think if they're not going to be a great analytics player, they're definitely going to be those kind of big-bodied guys.
Right, agreed. And as you mentioned, with the projected roster, we have a lot of kind of analytics favorites, especially in the bottom six. Looking at the team fact sheet, we're averaging 6'1.5", which would be the fifth tallest NHL team as there is. So we do have a lot of those kind of big body guys. We're averaging just about 200 pounds, which would be the 11th heaviest. So we're going to have one of the bigger teams, but I don't think we sacrifice on skill either. So we are kind of trying to get in that mind of Ron Francis and see, what kind of things he might be looking at.
Yeah, I don't know if 6'1.5" is enough. I think that ensures we need to bring in Dougie Hamilton.
Yep. That'll bump it up by
single,
half an inch.
yeah, just single-handedly rocket that up to like 6'3". That would be pretty great. Porkins, what do you think the first promotional night / giveaway night will be? Oh, again, all right. Like we're gonna have to do this like in arena experience video this week, I guess.
Right. So many questions on game experience. This is really something we ought to think about more.
Yeah.
I mean, you have like the standard, bobblehead type of things. You have, what do you think of the idea of like, those like thunder sticks where they got the two of them, you bang them together and they get loud, but they look like tentacles. They're kind of like, painted on the outside to look like tentacles.
Yeah, I think that would work really well. People love those. I've been to so many things, even not even just like a traditional sporting event, but like esports events and stuff. Like those are just like always one of the most popular things out there. I would love to see them do something where like they give away a commemorative puck for being there at the first game. Like
I would love
that. You could even have them numbered somehow, whether it's like a printed on the whatever like decals on the puck, or even if it's stamped on there. But I think not enough teams do things like that where it's the first game in this building, it's the first game in this franchise's history. I think it works really well to have something very specific to that night so that people have that kind of memento token to take with them, and always remember that experience, because that's what you want it to be. You want it to be an experience everyone's going to remember for a really long time.
I was there, and you want to show people, look, I was there. I went to opening night for the Kraken.
Yeah, or even just to look at it yourself, right? It always helps to have something like that. Yeah, and we've seen it time and time again, where new buildings open up, new teams start playing, and sometimes it really doesn't even matter what the end result of that game is. We've seen teams lose big in those situations, but people still remember those experiences so fondly because of just the atmosphere going into it and how excited they were. So
right.
I would want it to be something, maybe it could be even a t-shirt. We've seen that for like playoff games, teams give away t-shirts. So, for a special occasion like this, I think that would work.
All right. Sergeant Pickles, I think BC Place is actually a realistic choice being indoors, and both Kraken and Canucks fans could attend easily.
Yeah.
That'd be it'd be the Canucks hosting. I've been to BC Place a couple times. It's a really cool venue. Be indoors, but it's also more of like a stadium type environment. I would like to see a outdoor indoor game. I'd like to see that.
Yeah, I just think if the Kraken are going to be involved in one of those, I think they're going to make sure that it's in Seattle.
Right, and that they're the ones hosting it. Yeah. But it'd be a fun one, in addition to it, if you had the Canucks hosting and, the Kraken could be involved. That might be one I'd like to see for their first away outdoor game.
Yeah, for sure. Well, real quick, before we move on to the next question, do you think the NHL is going to really continue with a lot of these outdoor games every year? Now that we're leaving the NBC rights deal, because that was such a brainchild of NBC.
Yeah, it really was, but I just think there's enough money in it. There's enough interest. Gary Bettman at the most recent one in Tahoe, where he was talking about the outdoor games, and that one went just about as bad as you can imagine. With the ice, they had to stop it and everything. And listening to him talk about that concept for the outdoor games, and especially in more exotic locales, he seemed completely undeterred. He seemed just as confident in the idea, even though it didn't work out that time, that he would like to continue that sort of thing. I don't know, that was before the new rights deal, so I don't know how much that's changed, but it still seems like the kind of thing that Bettman is attached to and he likes. So I would think that the league continues that.
Yeah, I mean, those Chicago fans travel for those games, even when they have seemingly like 4 a year. So
right, you could always just throw the Blackhawks in a game and know you're gonna get your money back for doing it.
For sure. Lauren Darkin, should number 10 be retired by the Seattle Kraken?
Ron Francis, is that?
I guess so. I don't. Am I just?
Yeah. What are we? Here?
Give us a follow up there.
I mean, I think Ron Francis he's the number 10 that I can think of first, but
yeah.
Clarify chat. All
Yeah.
right.
Moving on to Daniel. Do you think the Seattle Kraken will choose a streaming partner for games besides having Root Sports? Again, that's something we talked about towards the beginning of the stream. Um, the streaming rights for the NHL are being held exclusively by ESPN moving forward. NHL.tv, which is the current streaming option for NHL games, is going to be folded into ESPN Plus, and they have named that as an exclusive streaming rights deal. So I think we're going to just be stuck with cable as far as local stuff goes.
Right. All right. Lauren Darkin, Francis was number 10. Yeah, that's where I thought he might be going with it.
Yeah, that would certainly be. I mean, that would kind of be unprecedented, right? To retire a number
right.
for someone
has done GM, especially someone who hadn't played for the team.
Right.
Yeah. No, I'd say let the first retired number be, someone who has kind of accomplished things in a Kraken jersey as a player.
Or if you want to pull from some of the history in Seattle, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like pull a Bernie Morris or Frank Foyston from way back with the Metropolitan days, right? First American team to ever win a Stanley Cup. Let's honor them in some way, and retire something for them, or you can choose a number that represents the whole team or something.
That banner would be cool in the rafters, like a Bernie Morris, but with the the Metropolitans kind of jersey style. It wouldn't be like a Kraken jersey or anything. Yeah. Look pretty cool in the rafters.
Or it could be 17 for the year that they won it, something like that. I think that would be really cool. But otherwise, we already know what their first retired number will be. It's going to be 99.
Yep. Yeah, it's true for every team in the league.
All right, Daniel, do you know the fan base organization Kraken Crew, and do you think we should have fan chants and songs people sing like inside a Sounders game? Yes, I love the MLS experience throughout that league, but it obviously comes from European soccer and all that stuff. But I think soccer has shown that they have more like in arena engagement with fans than any other sport, and I think that's absolutely something that Seattle should be interested in, kind of bringing over with them inside into the Kraken games. I'd be down for it. I don't know what it'd be. I think some sort of like sea shanty kind of thing could be really interesting. Might be cheesy, but really, who cares, right? It would be our thing.
Gotta own it.
Exactly.
And I think in European hockey, or like in Sweden, they have that kind of soccer almost atmosphere with the chants and all that stuff, and it just comes out great. It does work for hockey when you do it. And yes, we know Kraken Crew. We're familiar with the Kraken Crew. I want to shout them out also. They kind of promoted this. They retweeted this. The link and everything for this, and I think a lot of people who are watching now are part of the Kraken Crew members, and I think it's also really cool that that the team has kind of chosen to officially recognize them. We're interested to see kind of how that rebrand turns out, and and I want to shout out the Kraken Crew and the captain Brandon Seeley. He's been very nice to us and everything, and promoting people who are doing that work to cover the Kraken, and making sure that people kind of see what they're doing and see what we're doing. So I want to give a shout out to the Kraken Crew for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. What's your opinion on John Forsland being the play-by-play for the Kraken?
I love it.
Yeah, we love it.
I mean, you couldn't have found a better option, and I think the Kraken got lucky, just that he was available. It's not often that a guy like that becomes available, and you can tell because he was with the Hurricanes for 30 years before this. It's kind of a once in a decade type thing that someone like that becomes available, and it just happened to coincide with when the Kraken were starting. So I think beyond just a good decision, it was an amazing stroke of luck as well. So I'm thrilled with it. Dylan, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, just go back and look at any of those that 30-year body of work, and just look at some of those memorable moments and hear his play-by-play, right? Like, they're all fantastic. So I'm definitely looking forward to it. He's someone who's been around the sport long enough that I think, as this inaugural season gets underway and as we start having those first memorable moments for our team, that he's going to be someone who can do them justice, and whose call will be the call that we go back to, right? Many, many years down the line to remember those moments. So I'm excited for it, for sure.
All right.
Ethan, do you think the new draft lottery rules will really hurt the Kraken? So we talked about this a little bit last week. Um, I don't think it's going to hurt them too much because this draft in particular isn't front loaded with some superstar, once in a generation type guy, and combine that with COVID and the fact that scouting staffs haven't really been able to see a lot of these guys. They've all had shortened seasons. Some of them have had canceled seasons. So you're really, more so than ever, kind of throwing darts at a dartboard. So I don't think that this year the lottery rules are going to specifically hurt them as they enter the league.
And I think if anything, it helps them because unlike these other teams that are still playing for their draft position, the Kraken know where they're going to be. They're going to have the third best odds. That's not going to change. And so what that does going from 3 lottery picks to 2 is it guarantees them, instead of a top 6 pick guaranteed, they're guaranteed top 5. So, the lowest they can go, is now 1 higher. So I think that might help, as much as that increment, can help. But I think that could help. You saw Vegas in their initial season. They, kind of lost all 3 lottery spots. And so they dropped down to 6. That can't happen for the Kraken now. They will be top 5.
Yeah, so that'll be beneficial for them for sure. Sergeant Pickles, we need to, as a fan base, decide: do we claim to have won a cup? Ooh. I think the right answer is that Seattle as a city has a cup, but the team does not. Don't want to be like the Sens, lol.
Yes, I think that's always good advice. Don't want to be like the Sens.
Yeah, that's pretty universal in all things. Yeah, I think you said it right? Seattle has a history with winning the Stanley Cup. We were the first place to win a Stanley Cup in America. I think that has to be a part of things, and that has to be stated somewhere. I'd love to see kind of like a Seattle hockey history section in the arena where they might have some memorabilia or something, or even just some plaques that kind of go decade by decade. But yeah, I don't think the Kraken should be like, won that cup back in 1917. Yeah. Like, let's go. It would be
right. I think you really hit on it. Or I think you really hit on it that it's an accolade for the city, not the team. And I think you can make that distinction and make it well and still be proud of that accolade for the city, but also acknowledge that the team is kind of a clean slate and we're starting with that.
Yeah. So that's how I would handle it.
Oh, Dylan, you're going to like this next one. Lorne Darkin, what would you rather have? The Kraken to get the first overall pick this year and a successful season, or 2 bad years to get the first overall in 2023? Of course, Connor Bedard definitely looking like the favorite to go first overall in 2023. So I know you're always a fan of trying to get that next, big generational player. Dylan, in our arguments just in the past, he's always, tear it down, rebuild. You got to get the top prospects. I'm like, no, you don't need to do that yet. What do you think, Dylan?
Can we thread the needle and maybe be good this first year to establish the team in the city and then fall apart a year or 2 after that and get Bedard? Because ultimately, I think from a purely competitive standpoint, it makes more sense to be worse in a year in which that there is a guy like Connor Bedard available, right? We've seen the impact that those truly, truly great players have on teams coming in, and it's unmatchable. Certainly when it comes to where an expansion team is starting out, where they have 0 prospect pool, they're having to draft a bunch of guys that are not the best players on their teams in most situations. So yeah, my gut instinct is to tank for the best prospects available and let the situation play out over 3 or 4 years.
Right. And I would hope the Kraken would not be in that situation to even be thinking about it. you have that successful first season and you build on it, kind of like what Vegas did, maybe not to the extreme of going to the cup final, but where you're a playoff team and it looks like you're going to be that for a long time. And so you're not even thinking about a guy like Connor Bedard or that first overall pick. I do think that's what would be, ideal.
Yeah. I mean, it's working for Vegas, right? Like they haven't really had a top pick. Their top pick all along has been Cody Glass, which was their first pick from that first draft. So, and it's not like they're doing real poor right now. Yeah.
All right. Let's see. If you miss Bedard, Michkov isn't a bad pick. Yeah, that 2023 class is looking strong.
I always love when.
Are there any players you specifically don't want them to take?
The Penguins fan that still exists in me says Sidney Crosby.
That'd be cool to be able to see him around here all the time, though.
Yeah,
money and term. That's the big thing, is money and term, and age, I guess. Where those three all intersect. So like a Brent Burns, where you have money, $8 million a year, term, it goes for another 4 years, takes until he's 40, and age, again, it's going to take him till he's 40 on that contract. Avoid those kind of things.
Yeah, or I guess kind of it sticks with that theme, but certainly guys that have just lost all productivity at this point, right? Adam Henrique.
Yes.
For the love of God, don't take him. He's going to be available. Do not take him from Anaheim, right? Like they won't, obviously, but guys like that, where it's like, this guy was literally waived by his team earlier. He's got 3 years left on a big contract.
Yeah, just say, oh, well, he used to be this good. And I think the Kraken need to be careful not to try and catch a falling sword.
Yep.
Just let it go.
Yeah. So, I think they need to stay away from trying to, any reclamation projects. Like
right.
That's not really their spot right now.
Sergeant Pickles, he said, never mind, you basically just answered, but I do want to talk about this a little bit more because I was hoping this would be brought up. I know Vegas set a standard, but would you be upset if the Kraken just missed the playoffs year one? And I do think that's something we should go further into, is expectations for them in the first year. Without having seen the roster, obviously we don't know what it's going to be, but given what we think, what do you think should be the expectations for the first season?
I've tried to be pretty cautious with my expectations all along. I've said basically all along until we really got into seeing who they might be taking, that I don't think they'll be a playoff team year one, just because the division they're in can be difficult. That being said, I could see them being a low seed that gets bounced in the first round, and I think that would be okay. But I don't think it's like a disappointment if they don't go to the playoffs, right? I think we all know that Vegas was a different situation. The rules were a little bit different that favored them a little bit more, but I just think I don't think it's a bad thing for them to miss the playoffs year one. I think as long as they're here and as long as they show strides moving forward and as long as their community outreach and all that stuff is solid, that's really the stuff that's going to be most important, because we want the team to stay here and we want as many people in the city to fall in love with them as possible. So yes, winning is the best way to do that, but I think there's lots of other things that they could do to make up for not necessarily going to a cup final year one.
Right. And I do think growing the game and that sort of thing and building the fan base is going to be most important. But I do disagree with you on kind of what the expectation should be on the ice. Initially, maybe a year or two ago, I would think that, Vegas was this unique situation. And, because it hadn't happened in a long time, they're able to take advantage of this in a way that maybe a second expansion team wouldn't. But given the pandemic and the flat cap and, with all the work I've done doing the projected roster and just looking at the situations these teams are going to have with the flat cap, I think the amount of assets that Ron Francis is going to put together and that he can, choose to parlay into an effective roster, he's going to have so much leverage. I think the expectation should be playoffs in year one. And especially taking into account the fact that other GMs are going to panic and they're going to make stupid decisions like they did in 2017, because that's what they do. I think if that's one thing we've learned, that's what other GMs do. They will make stupid decisions to protect such and such a player that they shouldn't do. They're going to be falling all over themselves, just like 2017. And I think Ron Francis is not going to have to choose between now and the future. He's going to be able to get both if he does it correctly. So I do think the expectation should be playoff, not cup final, but playoffs first season. And I do think falling short of that, it would be a disappointment a little bit to me.
Yeah, and kind of playing into that, Sergeant Pickles, who's a player you could see the Kraken sending a first the other way to leave exposed, which is an interesting thought. We didn't see that from Vegas. I would want them to have a pick come in first, because I wouldn't want them to be like sending their top 5 selection away for someone, unless it's like a Jack Eichel, right? If Buffalo is going to be moving on from Jack Eichel, please do whatever it takes to get Jack Eichel to come, because that would be like the most amazing way to start this franchise off. But I don't know. I think any of the players that would be worth that are going to be younger guys that have been proven to be top 6, forwards or a top defenseman, and I don't see teams really wanting to move them. So I don't know that that's really going to be an option for Seattle.
The one that comes to mind, though, he's on our projected roster, but Matt Dumba, obviously, the Wild are going to have the option to probably trade him if they can't get their no move clause situation sorted out. They're going to just have to trade him. But if that's the case, why not, maybe have the Kraken send you a first, and you don't have to lose anyone else off your roster, and that takes care of the situation. I do think he's someone that the Kraken would like to have on their team, both for what he does on the ice and off the ice.
Yeah.
So I that's the one that I maybe could see a first going the other way, and that being the pick.
Yeah. I had skipped it for that last question, but Lauren Darkin, me personally, I'd go with the 2 bad years to get Bedard, because building a team around that generational talent is something very few teams get to experience. I agree. You've all heard my thoughts on it. I think it's worth planning that far in advance for. I just really believe that. Again, what kind of system would you like to see the Kraken implement? A contain the puck style or a dump and chase approach? Please, not a dump and chase.
Please not. The New York Islanders are a fine hockey team, and they're doing their thing, but I do not want to be the New York Islanders, like, systems wise.
No. As I kind of just talked about, for me, one of my big expectations is, getting as many fans to love this team as possible, and I think that they're going to be very successful in doing that. I think they will be markedly less successful doing that if they are playing a dump and chase style of game, in which every game is just a boring slog and there's little offense. I do not think that's what Seattle should be doing year one as they're trying to grow their fan base.
And I think the proper template for that is already out there in the most recent expansion team. And you look at what Vegas was able to do, and, not just by winning, but the way that they played was able to attract a lot of new fans because they were a fast team. It kind of took the NHL by storm at the time, just how fast they were in transition, and focusing on that transition type of game that Gerard Gallant preached. And, who knows, maybe he's an option for the Kraken as a coach too. But I think you're going to see them play a faster style of game that focuses on transition hockey. I don't think we're going to see that dump and chase, thankfully.
Yeah. So we're got about 5 minutes left. So if you got any pressing questions, make sure to get them in there now. Patrick, who do you think the biggest UFA signing by the Kraken will be this offseason? We talked about that earlier. Guys like Nugent Hopkins, if they're available, are people we're looking to target. Otherwise, Dougie Hamilton, if he's made available, we'd love to get him.
Chris Drieger, he could be the starting goalie, and it looks like he's something the Kraken are targeting. So, and we know how important goaltending is, if you get a good goalie. So I think Drieger could prove to be the biggest UFA signing.
Yeah. What do you think of Brandon Saad?
Because
he's not too old. It feels like he's been around for like a million years at this point.
How old is he?
28.
Wow. Okay. I would have guessed at least 30. Brandon Saad could be an option. He's been solid with Colorado this year, and he will be a UFA. I think if the money is right, he could kind of provide that second, that scoring that you need in the top 6 where he could slot in anywhere there. I'd like him as an option.
Yeah, and if you're saying, we think the team makes the playoffs year one, he would be a really good piece to have as far as like that kind of playoff experience and leadership.
Right.
Let's see. Got Sergeant Pickles. I'm putting the over-under on Washington natives on the team at 1.5. And I'm going bold and calling it 3 with Oshie, Johnson, and Gambrell.
Okay. I could see that. I mean, I like, if the Oshie thing works out, obviously we've talked about that.
Yeah.
Tyler Johnson, I think the Lightning are going to try and get him to Seattle one way or another. And they could have him for free if they want.
Yes.
We know that. And then Gambrell, we have him on the projected roster. I think the way the Sharks protection situation is shaking out, Gambrell looks like he's going to be exposed. He's probably going to be the player that has the most NHL experience and, that's most solidified NHL spot that is exposed by the Sharks at forward. So, yeah, I think he'll be there. I wouldn't be surprised to see all three. But yeah, 1.5. I think that's probably where the line should be.
I don't know. I was gonna say I think it should be 2.5 because I think there's really good chances that Tyler Johnson and Gambrell are the picks, and then the Oshie situation, as we talked about, is just gonna have to be a wait and see. So I might make it 2.5 even.
Yep.
Porkins, what coach who is hanging out there should the team avoid hiring? Well, in our coaching video, neither one of us were very kind of Bruce Boudreau. I would definitely think, for me, he's the guy that I'd like them to stay away from. And if you want to know why, go watch that video.
All right, I think we'll call last question here, or if there's one more. But do you see the Kraken naming a captain in year one?
I think I've come around to the idea that if Oshie is on the team, I think he'll be captain. Otherwise, I think they wait a year like Vegas did.
Okay. And that's if you have Oshie or maybe like Pavelski, but Oshie for sure, then they will. But I don't think they're going to be in any rush to unless there's an obvious candidate that makes sense.
Yeah, real quick, Lauren Darkin, stay away from Mike Babcock. Agreed.
Yes, way to point that out. I almost forgot about him. But yes, and I'm confident they will stay away from Mike Babcock. The Kraken group, I don't think they're going to do that.
Mm-mm. All right, so last question, Sergeant Pickles. If they sign Driedger, what term do you think they give? Seems like the Price, Bobrovsky, quick length deals don't pay off in the end. All right, I'm going to hand this over to you first because this has been something like literally our entire lives you've been passionate about.
Yes, I have very strong opinion on this. You want to go cheap in net. Do not ever spend Price, Bobrovsky money on a goalie. It never works. Goaltending is essentially this random sample size that you have guys that can be the top goalie one year and at the bottom the next year. Carey Price, Carter Hart this season especially. You just never know. So you want to go cheap. I think Driedger, they could sign a deal with him without breaking the bank. I think you might be able to get 4.5 million a year on, like, let's say hopefully like a 3-year deal, something short enough like that. If he wants to go more than that, a 4 or 5 year deal, I would not do it. But I think, especially given that he's going to have opportunity, if you can offer him something other teams can't as far as just the opportunity to play, I think that's going to be important to him. So that's probably where I'd come in with on that deal.
Yeah, I mean, we've already seen it with guys like Matt Murray signed a big contract, right? And already he was starting to seemingly decline, even though he's only 26. We just saw it with St. Louis. They just gave Jordan Binnington that big extension, and his returns the last couple of seasons have been in a straight downward trajectory. So, but real quick, is it the money that's more of an issue or the term? Because for me, it's more the term. If you're going to bring in a guy that has a fairly stable level of experience and give him 2 years at 8 per because you have the cap space, I'd be more okay with that than signing someone at 5.5 for 5 years.
Yeah, I agree. No, I think the term is really what gets you in trouble, because if things go south, then you're stuck with it. But for 2 years, I could see that being all right.
Yeah. And there we go. Officially, no more Babcock. Everyone's in agreement.
Everyone agrees. No Babcock. It's to the chat. No Babcock. No Babcock.
Yep.
That's a perfect way to end it. Yeah, a couple things I wanted to get to before we finish. We are at 397 Twitter followers. We're going to do another big sticker giveaway at 400. So let's get those 3 more Twitter followers. Hopefully tomorrow we can do a sticker giveaway. Because come on, look at it. Tell me you don't want one of these.
Yeah,
like
they're great.
And then lastly, it is Mother's Day tomorrow. If you haven't already, make sure you have plans. You know what you're doing. You've got her a card, some flowers, something. Make sure your moms all feel appreciated because they do a lot for us.
Yeah, no, that's definitely very important and a good way to end this. Thanks everybody for being here. Thanks so much. You guys gave us fantastic questions. You guys gave us some really good ideas for some future videos. We're seeing where the gaps are in our coverage of this. That's always great. And thanks in general for all the love you've been giving the channel and all of the videos and all the comments and everything. It's truly appreciated, and can't say thank you enough. All right, so everybody, have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll see you next time.